This is the Winning Plays Podcast on the CLNS Media Network, the leading online provider for the NBA's winningest franchise.
All right, new edition of the Winning Plays Podcast is back. My name is Brian Robb. The one and only Chris Forsberg of NBC Sports Boston is here to join us. And guess what, Chris? We're almost 10% through the season right now. 10 games in the books. Actually, more than that. 12%.
12%. You got to get your analytics are slipping.
This is dad brain. Getting me early and often today, but
that's too funny because we were just filming something for Celtics Post Up, and Amina was saying she's got mom brain, and so yeah, I think new parents as having lived that life, and even now 13 years later, I'm still saying I have dad brain. So I don't know, and 10 games in it doesn't feel like we've got enough to make wholesale decisions, but I think that's what we're going to do, right?
We're doing it. We're going through. Let's say 8 quick takes from the season. We'll alternate back and forth. What stood out?
Okay.
What's a surprise? Anything that comes to mind with this season so far? Throw them around because we're going to do a little turbo version of this pod here.
Okay.
And I'll start out here. I don't think this is the most important development of the season, but I do think it's pretty important for the present and the future in terms of the bench play. Sam Hauser can shoot. And he can shoot in NBA games. And I feel like this is an area, Chris, that they've been trying to find someone like this for years now, where they get that undrafted mid player that can, fill a big need. And boy, do they seem to hit it with this guy so far.
So a couple of funny things. One, I can remember right when they traded for Derrick White, I got to do the interview with Brad for our network in the aftermath. And I said to him, what does this mean now? You've had to give up some pieces. Your bench is a little bit thinner at that point. Would there be an opportunity for a guy like Hauser? And he's like, we need to be very Miami-like. We need to start finding some gems. Like Derrick White costs a lot of money. The top of the roster costs a lot of money. And then Sam Hauser really didn't play down the stretch.
Right.
And look, I think they were trying to figure out what they had in Neesmith at that point, but even he didn't get a whole lot of run there at the end as they kind of crunched down the rotation and just leaned on their guys. But I had this thirst for like what Sam could do. I will not think that and tell you that I thought he could do this. And yet what a revelation. Imagine if someone had told us in Las Vegas back on July 7th or 8th or whatever it is, after he went 0 for 10 from the floor or whatever, that this guy was going to be a 56% 3-point shooter in the NBA this season. I think I would have laughed at you. But yeah, to me, the bench as a whole is probably the biggest early season positive. And they haven't been perfect, but finding that diamond in the rough with Sam Hauser and getting what they've gotten from Brogdon, I think we forget quickly because there's other issues going on with the team that we'll get to, but that the bench was such a pain point in those playoffs and especially in the finals for them to look as good as they have. And when they win, the bench thrives. It's easy as that. And it's going to get even better once Derrick White's back there and all that. So I think Hauser in general, they needed someone no one is sitting here thinking about Danilo Gallinari anymore. No. That seemed like a pain point. Now, hey, let Hauser shoot. Is it sustainable?
I don't see why. I mean, is 56% sustainable? No. Is 45% sustainable? I don't see why not. Given the quality of he looks, he's going to keep getting here.
Do you ever think he's going to miss when he goes to shoot?
At this point, no.
It's weird.
They're so clean, and the release is so fast.
I just marvel because that's the biggest compliment you can give a shooter is that you have that fear that they're going to make it every time. And now teams have to think about that. Imagine once he starts driving closeouts more and doing the Grant Williams on the other side and putting the ball on the ground. I bet Sam has less dribbles than he has total 3-pointers this season. If I had to crunch the analytics, but it's impressive. And imagine if I had said 10 games into the season, we're going to start a podcast with Sam Hauser. And yet here we are.
Boom. And the other great part is that over 90% of his shots have been from 3-point range too. So that's in terms of getting the right shot selection here. And if they want to follow the Miami model, I guess the next important key here is, don't pay him $20 million a year for a 4-year deal. But they don't have to worry about that. They got him signed for a 3-year deal.
You got him locked up for 3 years.
3 years now. That's a big win for that front office right there as they plucked him again right after the draft. last year and waited him out. And lo and behold, he's become a pretty big part of the bench.
Everything about that, like if he had been a two-way player and done this, then they might have had to pay, presumably a little bit more if he had showed what he has so far this year, even coming off a two-way deal. Like, I don't know, like if someone would have splurged, but certainly based on what we've seen. And so just long story short is it all played out the right way for the Celtics. And now they might have a rotation piece on the cheap deep into their future.
All right. You hit the bench there. So we'll count that as number 2. I'm going to go to number 3 here. Are we looking at the best offense in NBA history? That is actually a question. That is
a question we have to ask about the Boston Celtics, who were terrible at offensive efficiency last year for like stretches, like not at the end of the year, but certainly at the start of the year. Yeah, it's kind of wild. 118 offensive rating as we record this, and the record I think is 117.3. The Nets a couple of years ago.
Yep.
Depending on which site you're taking your numbers from, but if you go off the NBA's actual data, right now this is the best and most efficient offense in the NBA. And yet, every time I think, is it sustainable? I think there are at least 2 to 3 painful lulls per game right now where they could be even better. And you look at like Sam's number of 132.5 when he's out there, and even Tatum's a little, I think, below the number. So it just feels like it could be sustainable. Now they'd have to maintain some really ridiculous 3-point shooting, but the way it's built. And so my question to you, B-Rob, is who gets the credit? Like, is this just them having the right pieces? Is this a Brad thing? Is this a Joe thing? Is this just the players? Who are we giving credit for the Celtics now having the greatest show on parquet?
Ooh, that's a really good one. I mean, you're certainly dividing up that pie. I can't give a whole pie credit there. But yeah, who gets the majority of the pie right now?
My network loves blame pie, but credit pie.
Credit pie doesn't taste as good. It's not as fun to deal with. But as far as the credit pie goes, I honestly think the biggest slice has to go to Brad in the front office.
Yeah.
From a standpoint of I think Brogdon is just a complete game changer for the bench, and obviously when he scores there, when he plays with the starters, you got Hauser. You kind of found, it took them a little while here, but you found the right mix, even without Robb Williams in the fold, and you're obviously showing some weaknesses on that front, but you have enough to counteract that. And I think honestly, number 2 probably goes to Missoula in terms of leaning into offense head first at the beginning of the year, and whether it's the no timeouts dynamic or just
wait, we're giving him credit for the timeouts?
No, you don't think I don't think we're giving him credit for it, and what we'll save that for another takeaway here.
Yeah, okay.
On the whole timeout idea, but I do think of a fact being guess what? We're playing offense this way no matter what all the time. Mm-hmm. And whether they don't naturally do that, but that's getting them to buy into that dynamic, play like that. And I think part of that is guess what? Yeah, you give 8 points in a row. Guess what? We're going to go run the same play again, and we're going to go try to do our thing there. So I don't think that's going to work necessarily in a playoff series or another against elite opponents, but through 10 games on a night-to-night thing, they're obviously the good times are outweighing the bad offensively pretty consistently so far.
Yeah. So I'm going to take that seesaw, and if we're up here on the offense, I'm going to go, I miss Robb Williams because the defense just hasn't been itself. And I mean, I don't know what the balance is. I do think it's obviously been a little bit better the last few games, and I do think there's been progress. Certainly they got it feels like, just anecdotally, I haven't been logging this all that much, but it feels like they're getting away from the drop more and just living with the more switching and getting back to sort of what they were. But I wonder what the difference will be when Robb's out there. I do think there's a natural tendency when your offense is humming like this, it's a little bit harder to dig in every time on defense, but I'd probably feel a little bit better if the defense was what was ahead right now and that they had just made incremental progress on the offense. So I'm struggling to because just as you said, this offense probably isn't sustainable into the playoffs. It can be great the regular season. It can be otherworldly, and it's great if it's better than it was last year in the playoffs. But the defense has to kind of play catch up. And is Robb coming back in mid-December or whenever enough to get it where it needs to be?
Yeah. How devastated are you if things start to go haywire if Robb comes back and he just
That would be
mess this up a little bit. Like, what? I don't know. Are you gonna be able to like sleep
that would
at night?
be,
That's his.
like if Noah Vonleh is a better offensive option than Rob Williams, then I need to I need to reevaluate life choices and sort of.
But the numbers say that won't be the issue. Like Rob, the numbers offensively for the Celtics have always gone through the roof with him on the floor.
And I just think with another lob threat out there, it should get them even better shot quality looks. It doesn't feel like that's possible. But I mean, one of the things and this will be one of the takeaways, obviously, is part of the reason their offense is awesome is because Jayson Tatum has ascended to a whole new level in terms of like ability to fight through bad nights and weather a storm and get to the free throw line. And that has a trickle down effect when there's all that attention on him. And so I think the offense won't budge. I think you're probably right. We're going to have some sort of overreaction. Rob will come back and be like, oh, the offense isn't as good, but it's just probably naturally going to slide back a little bit down to earth.
Yeah,
maybe not. I mean, we'll see. But yeah, I would be surprised if defensively they don't play a little bit of catch up in when Rob comes back. I've started wondering, Rob was the number one for odds on Defensive Player of the Year at a point this summer. Missing whatever it ends up being, 8 to 12 weeks, will probably likely take him out of that mix. Although if he played, 50 games, maybe you muscle in because that award isn't as fickle as, all NBA and that such. But I do think like it's got to get better. I think they'll just and I'm biased. I have to always qualify that, but I didn't know how much he covered up for. And, when Marcus has those moments where he's not as locked in, Rob cleans up a lot of that. And that goes for everybody on this team. And so I think they need him back if they're going to get to the level that I feel a lot more comfortable saying that this is a championship team.
What's your prediction on his return timing?
I feel like, what? I always feel like really weird when people are like, yep, on target. Everything's moving great. It like feels like we're setting up for a stomach punch. But I keep wondering. One thing they've stressed is they won't rush him. And so as you win games like you have this past week and win 3 games in a row, now there's not such an urgency to rush him back. When they were 3-2, I was like, oh my God, trot him out there on one leg. 7-3. Now I'm like, okay, what's the urge? So what do they got? They got that long West Coast trip in mid-December. Maybe right after that, part of me wants to do the whole trot him out there on Christmas and like as a Christmas present for everybody. But I don't know if they'll wait that long. If he's ready, right? Like,
right.
So, but I would think it would be tough for me to envision a scenario where a lot of travel on that trip. Do you bring him out west? Maybe he's on that trip, but he's not playing yet. And or maybe he's out there for the Warriors game. Like that might be ambitious, but like I hope it's a game of magnitude. Those things matter when you do get a little jolt when even if he comes out and plays 10 minutes and just shakes some rust.
It'll be like a Perk situation coming back from the torn ACL where you just show like I feel like there is
just show up one day, right?
Just show up one day like oh yeah Perk's playing.
Do you remember? I don't know if I've ever told this story on. Do you remember that? Do you remember how we found out?
No.
So
I was just starting to cover the team then, so I didn't even know if I was like in the building at that point.
And he left his playbook in his locker, and it said on the back, "Welcome back, big man," something like that. And I remember I saw it, and I was like, I was too scared to just and this is the early days of Twitter, but I was like, I can't just go with this. I need to go find someone. So I went running out to the front, and Jackie McMullen had actually just sat down to talk to him for something she was doing for ESPN, and he admitted he's like, yeah, I'm back tonight. Wow. And so then it sort of snowballed. But it was funny. Like back when nowadays they keep everything under tight lips, but no, just a big hey, welcome back, big man, written on the front of his playbook.
That's great. All right, next one for me. I'm still curious, and this is still a semi-concern from Monday night's win over the Grizz. Crunch time, offense in general, lineups. Do we think that they're figuring this out? The same kind of concerns are lingering there in terms of not scoring and not being able to get consistent stops in these critical points of the game. Do you have a lineup you like or you don't like? Whether it's going big, small, what's the temperature at on this?
Interesting. I don't have a lineup I like yet, but
is that concerning?
Yeah, I think so. I do like that Joe showed the ability to be like, hey, Marcus, you're not helping us right now. We're going to lean on Brogdon or White or whatever. On the opposite side of it, sometimes if you're just throwing darts with that and you don't know who's going to be your crunch, I do think they need to settle on that. And again, maybe when Robb's back, maybe that's easier to decide. I don't know if Robb will be like the crunch time guy or not, but they got to figure that out. And it is a concern that the offense tends to go stagnant, that they get away so much from what they do, and that they seem to panic. Even last night, like the two travel calls on Grant and Jalen were like preposterous. It's like they're finding new ways to let teams back into games. And so I do hope that they sort of experiment a little bit here. If we think, and maybe this is just me, I feel like Joe is very much a clone of Brad and operates in very similar ways. And I think, what did Brad do throughout much of the early part of seasons? He would tinker and try and trying to figure out what he liked, and then he kind of lock in later in the year. I wonder if Joe's trying to get a grasp and data and stuff like that on what works best. But yeah, I'd feel a lot better if we knew what the Celtics crunch time lineup was and if their numbers were better. Although the one other, I'm qualifying everything here. Remember last year, my biggest concern going into the playoffs was like they don't win crunch games, and it's not like you can just turn that up. And then I read like someone actually did a study on it and was like, no, there's no correlation between regular season crunch time and postseason crunch time. And sure enough, the stupid Celtics go out and like dominate crunch time in every game in the playoffs. And so, I won't get.
They blew some though too, like game. What was it?
No, and that's fair too.
The Bucks, like
if they had taken care of business quicker, then they would have been fresher against the war. There's like, we can play that whole game.
Yeah.
But they were like epically bad, I thought, in crunch time last year. I would like to see some incremental growth there. Maybe that's the final frontier for the Jays and stuff, is to like, okay, like it's crunch time, give us the damn ball and like not make stupid errors like the entire team has.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't even hit on Tatum here. And I feel like that's, again, like you said, with the growth he's made this season, I think now it's like he's the number one guy you want to have the ball in crunch time. And honestly, number two might be Brogdon, just because I feel like he doesn't panic. And he's like, all right, this is an adult in the room who doesn't have a history of this, just like turtling in these spots. So guess what? Like things seem to go well when the ball is in those two guys' hands. And so that's something. I
think you might have tweeted it. And forgive me if I'm giving you credit for someone else, but it is interesting to me that Smart, he did not have a good start to the year. I thought he was like, he took some bad shots at crunch time. And then ever since going to the bench for the crunch time, it's 23 assists to 2 turnovers or whatever. And it's like, oh, maybe Marcus needed a little reminder about, what he needs to do to thrive. And good for him, because they can all be guilty of that at times this year, where it's just there's a singular focus. And now, you just kind of got to get back to what you do. And maybe that's the secret to the defense as well. Like, hey, you got to commit, you got to dig in, you got to get better. And we'll see if the rest of them want to ramp it up a little bit. Yeah,
I think it's a really good point. And it's the competition is there. There's still plenty of options for Joe to pick from. And I think it's clear that he doesn't want to lose any of these guys, but at the same time, he has to be like, hey, yep, you got to do what you do best, or else guess what? We got someone. Should we
do some Tatum talk? Like, I mean,
let's close out
the guy who might be the MVP.
Yeah, I think we should. I think that's fair. 31.2 points per game, almost 50% shooting from the field, 9 free throw attempts per game.
What is your favorite thing about Tatum's growth this year?
Oh, I think it's easily the finishing around I think he's gotten a lot smarter with his shot selection around the rim. Floaters, just like putting himself in better. Like, when's the last time you saw like an out of control shot that was like, oh, what are you doing? Like that I feel like that shot has kind of disappeared from his diet. I mean, we still see them from like Jalen, which is another story, but that's another. Yeah, we can go there another day. But for that now, it's like, that's the thing for me. What sticks out to you most?
I really, and maybe it's recency bias, but watching him kind of want to guard the other team's best player at the end of games is really encouraging. I'm not looking for Jayson Tatum to go out there and want to guard the best player all night. Like, I think you're wasting his energy because he has to carry such a burden on that offensive end. But I love that you think back to the Cleveland game, blocking Donovan Mitchell at the buzzer to just force overtime. The last night, taking Morant on at least 3 or 4 possessions there at the finish line, getting the block on the leaner, a couple threes that he just kind of challenged him to take over him. Maybe I'd feel differently if he made them. But even then, one of them he leaks out and does the big exalt at the other end. I think we're seeing sort of Tatum recognize if he's going to be in the MVP conversation, that side had to be a priority. And not that it wasn't before, but he just kind of got away with it based on being 6'11" and long arms and all that. And now he's sort of harnessing it a little bit and taking on that challenge. And so that's what's going to differentiate him from Luka. Might put up more points, but Tatum's better two-way right now. I don't know if he'll ever get to Giannis's level of impact, but maybe that doesn't matter because voters get fatigue, and maybe it'll just be like, okay, the Celtics win 60 games. Jayson Tatum scores the first Celtic to beat 30 plus points. And, he plays really good defense. Maybe that's enough to get him in the MVP conversation. Not that he doesn't belong in that conversation already, but when you're the best player and you're impacting both sides for a 55-60 win team, you're just all the more likely to be up in that convo.
Yeah. I think he's knocking down that door pretty firm right now. I think, he's been the best defender on this team.
And the free throws. And the free throws
are just huge. But
that's into my veins. Go with a purpose, which, again, like you said, I think Jaylen Brown's had a lot of good moments. I feel so bad because he's had like a bunch of 30-point games and yet like the turnovers and just like the reckless drives. What I would say to this is because there'll be people that look at this and go, "Oh, there's such Jaylen haters." Like he really has been really good and in stretches, and yet he has just those lapses that you wish. And I think it's just because we hold him to such a high standard for what he can be, and he's got it in him. So he's just got to show it more consistently.
Yeah, it's an awareness thing, and hopefully they keep it gets drilled into him when he looked. 3 or 4 defenders are just waiting for him down there almost every time. Now it's probably frustrating for him, but that's the play that you need to make at that point. All right, a couple quick ones on the way out here.
Yeah.
Number 1, or this will be number 7 for us. I'll have you close out here. I appreciating the Al Horford is playing the second half of the back-to-back stance, heading into every back-to-back, and then coming up with something at the last minute. To have to sit out there. I hope they continue this the whole season.
I do. And after all those teams started getting fined for injury report shenanigans, I thought maybe the Celtics would have to peel back that curtain. But credit to Al. I fully 100% believe Al wants to play in every game. Course. And I fully 100% believe the Celtics know that is a ludicrous idea. We talked about it in the preseason pod. Like, if he got anywhere near those 2,000 minutes or whatever it was, the crazy number last year.
He's already playing 20 minutes. He's already playing 32 minutes per game right now.
Exactly. So you have to protect him from himself. And you're rewarded because there's nights like last night where, Al looks like he turns back the clock for a couple plays and had one loud dunk. And I was like, wait, is he flying in and hanging on the rim and throwing down alley-oops and stuff like that? So, protect Al from himself such that when he's 37 years old in the NBA Finals next year, that he still has a little bit left in the tank. But lower back stiffness is also the best injury for anyone who's 36 years old in the NBA. Because I after a round of golf, I'm like, oh yeah, on that. So I'm trying to think what we can close out on. The only person we really didn't hammer home, but so Derrick White has been an analytics darling and will help the bench when he goes there. He's done good enough with that group. It's weird. His on-off splits are amazing, even though he's played most of his time with the starters, and the starters their on-offs are trash. So go figure. That's just one of those guys that just makes good things happen. Grant has been obviously much better than and I wouldn't say much better, but came back with more than I expected. And so my final thing will be, we'll keep it topical. Disabled player exception, which people get all worked up about. Thank God Dwight Howard signed, the Taiwan, because I could not take any more Dwight Howard talk. They're just going to wait and use it with buyout guy, right? That's the only real advantage it gives them.
100%. And that make it, and who knows how much money matters in those situations. But if you do have, you're going up against the Bucks or some other big name team that you can say you're just as much of a contender as them, then throwing a little extra cash on the pile there Can't hurt. But yeah, I don't expect this to be used until late February at the earliest once the trade market settles down. But
I keep telling people, like, if they wanted Dwight Howard, they could have signed him before disabled player.
I know.
You still need a roster spot. You still got to get rid of poor Justin Jackson or whoever would be the fall guy in that instance. And I just don't see this team feeling it's an urgency. And now when you're 7-3, that you have that luxury a little bit. So as long as they keep winning and a couple layups against the Pistons here, and maybe you're feeling pretty good, and you get through to Robb, and then we've said it from day one, they're going to look up and evaluate. Do you need a wing more than a center? And they'll figure that out. But certainly. I don't know what $3.2 million with a guy who's in the final year beyond like the signing a buyout guy is. It just doesn't make sense.
There's just not many contracts out there to even fill that, much less be someone you want. So
don't worry. Everyone online is going to tell us that you take the DPE, Payton, Pritchard,
combine it,
and 7 TPs, and you combine it and get a $26 million player. So, let's end on that. Payton Pritchard, do you secretly seething or just like resign to his fate?
I mean, he's got to be seething.
Kind of sucks, right?
It sucks. It's brutal. It's like, oh yeah, the Celtics are the best 3-point shooting team in the league, Chris. And guess what? Payton Pritchard, their best 3-point shooter heading into the season, isn't even playing.
That's wild. It really is wild. I feel bad for him. I was sitting down with Marcus Smart. I mean, whatever that last practice was, October at this point. But yeah, he was really trying to encourage him because you could tell, even just working out at full speed, he was frustrated missing shots. And so hang in there. Malcolm Brogdon and Derrick White and Marcus Smart injury history suggests there'll be an opportunity. So it sucks that you got to wait for that, but good on Payton for being a good teammate while waiting that out.
It is. It's a luxury of riches for Joe Mazzulla off the bench, but certainly a tough spot for
a luxury for the greatest offense in the world. For the greatest
offense in the world. And speaking of great offenses, Chris Forsberg, great wardrobes, NBC Sports Boston. Make sure you check him out on Post Up, Celtics Post Up on NBC Sports Boston tonight.
Yeah, if you're watching this on Tuesday, click over.
Yeah, this will be out.
Don't worry about the elections.
Was it 8 o'clock tonight?
8 o'clock tonight, I believe.
All right.
And then you can go over to your election coverage on NBC 10. But thank you, B-Rob.
There we go. All right. Rate, review, subscribe to the Winning Place Pod, and we will catch up with you guys later this week.